So we're March 30th, Good Friday, at 10:30 in Niagara-on-the-Lake, meeting between Mr. Marotta and we will introduce ourselves perhaps as a way of starting. My name is Lyle Hall. I'm one of many people who are involved in the SOAR group, Save Our Rand Estate. As you know, there are a number of people involved in our organization, and trying to stuff them all into one room, David and I were the two that have been asked to represent that group today.
David Bell also was asked by SOAR to sit in on this session. But for a bit of context, I'm a resident on Charlotte Street across from the property. Ron.
Robert McKenzie. I'm representing Cortec Group. We are the architects been working on the current development. We're not the planners. Our previous involvement in the site would have been that of being involved in the planning of the previous 2011 work that went on.
My name is Benny Marotta. I'm the owner of a family-owned business called as Two Sisters Winery, Two Sister Properties, which owns the Rand Estate and land behind. Also, building a company called the Solmar Development. It's a family sole-owned companies, headed by me, and that's about it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to take the chance just to make an opening statement, just sort of to bring people up to speed. And first off, thank you very much for taking the meeting. We'd like to iterate that we're here as representatives of SOAR. We're here to listen and to ask questions to you today on matters identified in the correspondence between our lawyers previously. We're not here to negotiate anything. We don't have a license to negotiate. We're here simply to listen and to gather information, and we intend to take this information that you provide back to our members and supporters for consideration and for the appropriate feedback. And we're hopeful that there may be future meetings to advance the development or the proposal. I'm sure, as you know, that in 2010 and 11 there were extensive discussions between the Romance Inn, the proponents, the town, and the residents. And this resulted in a heavily negotiated compromise of a hotel development on the Rand Estate properties at the 144 and 176 John Street East. The official plan amendment for that project only narrowly made it through council by one vote, and it was clear that the Romance Inn proposal was right at the limit of what the town was prepared to accept. In addition to the locally and nationally significant heritage value of the Rand Estate, an important criterion in the assessment of the Romance Inn proposal was that it had to be sensitive to the fact that the proponent was seeking to convert an area that was zoned residential in the middle of an area that was residential to commercial use. Accordingly, the official plan amendment for the Romance Inn was narrowly approved by council, was carefully designed with specific conditions to protect the important heritage assets of the residential and the peace and quiet and quality of the residential neighbors. Given the significance of the Rand Estate and the legitimate concerns expressed by the town and the community, a number of conditions were imposed on the official plan amendment to ensure that matters such as designation of the Rand Estate under the Heritage Act, tree preservation plan, archaeological assessment, and other approvals were completed before any development. And very importantly, the authority to approve the final designation and the design, actually, of any new building on the Rand Estate was given to the Municipal Heritage Committee. That committee, as we're sure you are aware, retains the authority under the Ontario provincial, under the official plan specific to the Rand Estate to approve whatever you're proposing to build on the site. It's fair to say that so far the committee has been less than impressed seemingly entirely unimpressed with the proposal. That's my opening statement, and I just invite Mr. Marotta to make a comment if he wishes. If not, we'll go into some questions.
Yes, I have comments.
Okay.
As of today, I don't think that we have been given the opportunity, a proper opportunity to the residents of Niagara-on-the-Lake, which I'm one of them actually. I'm a Niagara-on-the-Lake resident. Due to don't know what, but I think there's a lot of political games going on, and I don't think that people really know what's the design that we have for the real estate. We understand real estate is a very special place, which always, since I came into Niagara-on-the-Lake in 2006, I always looked at it like the most beautiful place on earth. I mean, Niagara-on-the-Lake is a special town. It needs to be treated that way. And that's the reason why we as a family decided to become resident of Niagara, build ourselves a home for our family. And since the area is a wine country, I've been a wine lover, so we did a winery, which today, I think it's award-winning wine in the wine industry in Niagara. I'm very proud of it. We have many people from Niagara-on-the-Lake coming to the winery to lunch and dine, buy wine, and I thank everyone that comes to join our wine. So I think that as of today, myself and my family approved that whatever we've done as of today has been always done with class. Only we're asking the residents of the community to work with us and see how can we come up with something that benefits the town and the community as a whole. So we need that opportunity. I think that as of today, there's been so much information given out that they're not facts, they're lies. Someone is manipulating the truth. I understand, at times there is two types of people in this world where at times it's difficult to deal with. And these are politicians and real estate agents.
And
Real estate agents. And I have great respect from real estate agents and politicians. But at times there is circumstances that people, they manipulate things so they become popular for their own agendas. So I'm not saying that it happened in Niagara-on-the-Lake, but it seems that that's what's happening. And I think that people should understand it, and people should not be used by people like that to come up with things that is not appropriate. There's been some notes put into the Facebook by some of the residents, which is offensive. It's inappropriate, and that should stop before they make those accusations or those comments. I always believed in communication, so I'm here every weekend. I'm open to meet with anyone that wants to meet with me to find out the truth. Hopefully today we can, so people will find out exactly what's happening. So I'm looking forward to work with the community to make things happen with no politics involved. Because that's the only way politicians can make things happen, good and bad. So we're not interested in something bad, only good. So let's take politicians out, that they're interfering with this process. We have a process that should be followed by the community and by people like me. So I look forward to work with the community to do that. So let's try to be honest to each other. I was raised in a way that at times you may disagree with people's opinion, but you must always respect the person behind, because that's the way it should go. And that's what's not happening. So I'm asking kindly to everybody that if there's any issues, I'm one phone call away. And I'm always open to open discussions with anyone there's an issue. So that's my statement.
Very much appreciate that, and I know I'll speak for David and I. Neither one of us have a social media presence, so the comments, which I can understand can sometimes get out of hand, is not coming from one of us, and it's not coming officially from SOAR to the extent that we can control that. And I think let's put. I understand the sensitivity on what you perhaps see as lies, but let's put that aside. If there are specific things you're concerned of that we can control, then let us know what those are after the meeting, and we will deal with those. But I think, if I can call you Benny.
Yes, of course.
Coming back to your point about the community and it being a special place, I know that's why David and I both live here. We enjoy the community that's been built here. And we respect the processes as well that have been put in place to ensure that this remains a wealthy place to live. And I think that maybe where we'd like to start off in terms of asking some questions is to go back to 2011 and a very hard-fought, contentious debate over the Romance Inn proposal that Gary Peterson and Doug Fowler had on the table that was agreed to, as David mentioned, in a very close 4-3 vote. And start off our discussion this morning by asking you simply, you purchased the property with an official plan that allowed a certain degree of development. Why are we not sitting here talking about that project rather than something that's so substantially different from what the community reluctantly agreed to permit in 2011?
Well, I'm going to, before, I think that on the technical point of view, I think Robert can explain a lot more than me. But let me address what I think happened in the past. For what I understand, those lands were for residential use at one time. The Romance estate decided to change it to commercial for hotel use. So I think that what was designed at the time, it was not designed, in my opinion, I don't think it was designed to be actually built, because probably was strictly for zoning, because the way it was designed, in effect, it's not been built. Those are the reason why. Right? I think it was designed more to please all the complaints that they had, all the commotion within the town itself, all the revolt of the community. So I think it was done in a way that, okay, what you want this, okay, let's do it. Then when it was done, every business, it needs to make financial sense, otherwise no use doing it. So the way it was designed, if you have to build it, anyone that has to invest into a project like that won't touch it, because it makes no sense. Everything has to have a value to it. There's an income that has to be justified in order to justify the cost and the maintaining of the property. The Rand estate has almost 14 acres on its own. Just to maintain it cost quite a bit of money. Now, if you put up a hotel in it, where the amount of rooms and the amount of facilities to create an income doesn't match what you need to maintain it, how are you going to do that? You can't. So we did our homework, we did our studies in order to maintain a hotel of that, a property of that type. In order to break even on a hotel point of view, you need about 115 rooms to break even. Less than that, you can't touch it. You need to maintain a property like that. Once you build a place like a hotel, it's public use.
But is that a realization you came to after you purchased the property? Or was that, had you done the studies and come to the conclusion that it wasn't economic
I did after
before?
that.
After?
Yes. So we went through the studies. We hired people to tell us how to make sense of what was designed. And we came up with the conclusion that really it didn't make sense. The cost of building what was designed on paper, it's cheap, it's very economic on paper. To build it, it's a different beast. And then the income of what I had, based on the rooms that I had and everything else, it really didn't make sense. We also came to the conclusion, I'm a tree lover, more than anybody else in the community, just so people know. We visited the site, and with the architects, I think Rob came along a couple of times, and some engineers and landscaping architects, all these people. We noticed that most of the buildings were designed on the property, in effect, was going to destroy trees that are 200 years old, and there were buildings on it. So we didn't really, we're happy with it, and we decided to, we decided to hire Rob McKenzie, local architect, which understands the community, the way it works, understands the heritage, understands the architecture, all these things. And he did comment and said that what's been designed, it will destroy the Rand estates, basically. It should be left as it is. So Rob McKenzie was one of the protective persons that we met in Niagara that said, we have to make sure that we don't destroy what's been grown in this place for the last 200 to 300 years. That's what we did. So, based on what's designed, we are not going to build that because we want to protect what's into the estate.
And so you realized you would end up with the largest hotel in Niagara-on-the-Lake after building what you're proposing. And so others obviously have made their hotels work.
Well, the other hotel, the commercial hotels, what's called, that they are in Niagara-on-the-Lake, that they're building as we speak in the Glendale area, some are existing. Those hotels, they only have 2 acres, and it's all parking lot and a building.
Right. But I'm just saying, from an economics point of view, this hotel is
145 rooms.
This one's 122, actually. You're proposing 145.
That's correct, yes.
But what I'm saying is there are all the other hoteliers in town have seemed to make a go of it, and I guess, and I don't want to belabor this particular aspect, but the concern, Benny, is the 105 room hotel, which was in the Romance Inn proposal, you're saying uneconomic, but we're now talking about a 50% increase in rooms, but 400 underground parking spaces, which, if I do my math, is tens of millions of dollars, and that just adds to a complexity on the overall project cost here that doesn't seem to pencil out.
Well, a couple of corrections, what you said. Number one, the rooms they're not 50% more. Because there were, I think, 106 rooms they had in the hotels, and then they were gonna have some rooms in the existing buildings. So we are 145. So it's not 50% more the room. So this misinformation given to people, that's what causes the problem. So let's be careful with what we say, because that's what distorts the truth in somehow. So I think that they had about 122 rooms between the existing buildings and new buildings. So we are only 23 rooms more, which is not 50%.
No, you still have you were adding the 8 rooms from the Devonian house, so we should keep the only the rooms they had in the building where the built was what was approved on the new build. That was not 122 rooms.
But based on my understanding, the hotel to be built for 106 rooms. Plus they had, they were gonna do some hotels within the existing homes. But let's leave it 106, not to confuse things, because of the time you're confusing things. Even 106 to 145, they're not 50% more rooms, so let's make it clear. So we don't wanna give the wrong information to people. Okay, so.
There are 145 rooms, we can agree on
Yes,
that.
yes, versus 106. So it's not 50% more. So because people sometimes, once they heard things, they start thinking and say, oh, Jesus, really? Well, it's not. Not this one. Then also, comparing to hotels in the town itself, they were built 50 years ago. The construction cost at the time was 10% of today. So, in steel, they're surrounded by other buildings, so there is no cost to maintain the outside. But once you have 200-300 trees that we have to maintain every year, we have 14 acres that we have to maintain landscaping, and all these things that cost a lot more. So you cannot compare with the existing buildings and the real estate. Two different beasts. There's no comparison.
I might just bring up a different. I think there's a discussion about is the number of rooms the right number of rooms? Should there be more rooms, less rooms? I mean, that's open for discussion.
Yes, of course.
But at what cost? I mean, you see the cost of your construction, but what is the cost to the built heritage and landscape heritage? And
Yes.
what is the cost to the peace and quiet and safety and security of the neighbors? And that's an important criteria. Yes. In the previous debate that we came to about the romance proposal, those were the critical issues. Those were the critical issues that focused on 3 stories, because 3 stories was what was equivalent to the neighboring houses, and they didn't want a situation of overlooking. You're giving me a wince, but in actual fact, were you at the table? I was at the table. That's why I'm saying that.
I vaguely remember it a bit.
But part of the whole debate was, and there was big discussion about setbacks and having big vegetative buffers, so you didn't have a situation where people in the hotel were overlooking Calvin Rand's pool. And those were all issues that recognized that this was a residential property originally, and in changing it to commercial, that they really wanted to minimize the impact on the neighbors. So in the discussion of appreciating the fact that, and this is your challenge, because you're the architect, you have to solve the puzzle, right? But the issue is building, for Benny, an economic project, but it has to respect the heritage, and it has to respect the neighbors, their peace and quiet. And I think we'd probably like to have some discussion about your proposal, and as these things that you're proposing, how you've changed the plan and how you've made it. Let me put the challenge out there. You've made it better for yourself for business. That's great. But have you made it better for the heritage of the town? Have you made it better for the residents? And and that's gonna have to be weighed in the end, and, I mean, is that an easy one to do?
It's never an easy one to deal with.
Before just I want to answer to that. In our opinion, together with Rob McKenzie, architect, we feel that between what was proposed and what we have, we are improving and we're protecting most of the heritage component of the estate. A lot better than before. The only problem that we have as of today, we were not given the opportunity for people to see actually what they want to do, but rather just screaming and yelling, we're trying to kill the rent estates. No, we're not. If rent estates stays as is, where nothing happens, we'll rot. We know what we did, and we have proofs, which I'm going to show you a little bit later. Hope that we have all day, because we have a lot to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're going to show you what we did, and what was said, our direction, and what has been said by others, and it's completely the opposite. So, we're not designed to make economically sense for Benny. We're trying to make economic sense that can build something that will survive time, and not opening tomorrow and shut it down the day after. We're not into that. So everything has to make sense for Benny, for the community, and for the states. Number one.
But you acknowledge that you're trying to make things better. You acknowledge that it's not just in your eyes, it's in the community's eyes, and that there's places like the Municipal Heritage Committee,
Yes.
who has a statutory responsibility actually to overlook and make these calls. So it's not even necessarily what I think or what you think. It's what that committee thinks. So I take it you've already gone through a couple rounds with the committee. They've made a series of recommendations, and so you want to get them on side. So you agree with their recommendations?
Okay, number one, I'm not too much part of what's happening on the technical point of view, and I don't think that as of today we had any meetings with the Edge Committee for our proposal.
You've had two.
No, we didn't. No one, what was exposed at the public meeting, that was very wrong the way it happened. Because prior to that, I don't think we had a meeting with the Heritage Committee to show what we were doing. At least I'm not aware of that.
To respond, there were two opportunities to meet with the advisory committee. Typically, the roles of the advisory committee are to provide early advice on a development. And I think both of those instances, both for the Urban Design Committee and for the Municipal Heritage Committee, were to seek advice. At no point in time have we just received information through the planner and through the planners that are involved with this development to digest the comments of the committee, but also we have accepted the comments of all those who were not necessarily on the committee, but added information to both the UDC meeting as well as the Municipal Heritage Committee meeting. In addition to the traditional public information meeting, which was to, again, collect information, questions from the public as a whole, to digest, and then to regroup and propose. So at no point in time have we had an opportunity to discuss some of the aspects of it. Not all, but some of the aspects that seem to be contentious. So we would be happy to do that, but no one's heard it from me or from, I think we've heard some general planning strategies from the planning group as to why some of the choices were made in terms of the massing of the building and its location. And those massing decisions, although I'm not an urban planner, as an architect, we understand how contextual design works in terms of the impact on neighboring properties to put into context the unique nature of the Rand estate. It's unique because it is the largest estate lot in the old town. It's unique because it has such a large mass of land that, yes, one approach could be to build closer to the boundary edges, which was the approach that was taken in 2011, under the auspices that would be least impactful, not only to the heritage aspect, but to neighbors in the area. But I think that was half of a solution. It's the solution that may be the solution of least resistance at first example, but it's not necessarily the solution that is appropriate for the size of site that we had at Randwood to consider. And that meant that if you have larger distances from neighboring properties that you can work with, create a larger, more central mass that stays further away and is less disruptive to the neighborhood. And this is an acceptable approach to general massing that me as an architect or as an urban planner would consider as one of those several options to consider. So on that front, yes, we can certainly look at what the 2011 proposal brought to the table, but I think in our analysis we found that that solution was actually more impactful on the heritage aspect that the town and all the members of the public are so very concerned about than what we are proposing in our.
Could I ask you to expand on that? How is this proposed? That's not obvious to someone.
Well, and in fairness, and maybe if I may, if you allow me, I can just show what was the 2011 plan, if I may.
Sure.
Do you have any problem with that?
No, of course not.
If I may, I think I have it here.
We need to try to, we want you to understand what's in our mind, the direction that we're going, and to see if we're right or we're wrong. And we are going to accept suggestions and better solution in order to make the whole community at peace and moving on with our lives. So, because this doesn't help anybody. It makes no sense.
There's I think there.
We're all adults, so.
Yeah, there's some technical stuff that can happen here so that the audience can also see what.
Sure.
So bear with us, everyone, as we.
I think we should also, just as we're getting organized, point out, just a reminder, we have 2 hours scheduled.
Oh, okay.
So we need to stay within that because our tech
We'll do our
folks
best.
have a hard deadline on
Yeah.
that, and I think to be respectful for everybody who might be watching at home too, we should stay with that.
That's fine. And again, I don't
It's
think,
hard to,
we don't want to delve into all of the details of it because, but I think just to show you, this is one of the site plans, probably the most telling site plan that came out of the planning approval process in 2011. And it's not by me, it's by a different architect. Its development, it largely dealt with massing, and there were other character pieces that described sort of what the flavor of the day in terms of architecture was relevant to, and we won't even get into style. We'll just deal with massing in this context. But what you see at face value is a lot more building and a lot more building coverage of actual footprint. By a 9% factor is what my rough calculations are, with just the coverage of all buildings alone. Am I far off?
Well, According to the definitions of coverage, yes.
Okay, but then even if we,
Because the coverage of this proposal, if you include, of your proposal.
Yes.
That's what we call,
that's fine.
an underground garage
Yes,
is part of coverage.
yes, it is.
And I don't think that underground garage is in your calculations of coverage, so that your coverage unfortunately in the proposal, there's many gaps of information,
And
which
fair
would be appreciated if all those gaps were closed. But when you leave a gap, we're forced to fill it. I have to pull out my ruler, measure things. The number I came to, and I went through planning, Raymond, with this,
Sure.
was that it was a 17% coverage when the underground garage. A guess. I'm sorry, Benny. I'm not meaning to put misinformation on the table. I'll admit that number could be totally wrong.
I'm not an expert into this,
And
so,
if you admit that, I'll admit the same, that I've done some very preliminary. But I think what you may see as well, sharing that there was an underground parking structure as well included in the 2011 development.
Yep.
This is roughly the amount of surface or impact of the construction, including the underground parking lot. And this is relatively the same. Now, they're not at the same scale, so please don't see that this is smaller. They're not at the same scale, but I'll show the overlays. But in terms of area alone, between this development and this development, concluding the underground parking, this still is in excess of the numbers. And again, excusing my late night calculations, but with the coverage of disturbed new building and new landscaping that goes over top of whatever underground structure, we are in the order of 10% less than what was being presented in 2011 just for this area, which is the coverage of the hotel development, the new portions, and any overburden that would be involved to excavate it and do the normal work for a building.
Okay, and I think we would appreciate that information being shared, so that we can take it back. We're not in a position to debate it.
And we're not gonna,
Yeah. But-
and to speak further though, because you asked me about the heritage impact of it, I only have spoken to you in context with how much building coverage has been impacted as a result of this. When I factor in the amount of new landscape elements in the form of roads that were created, and in particular the roads that were actually created in the Dunnington Grub portion of the site, the difference in the amount of disturbed building, of disturbed area on the 2011 compared to the current application now is a 23% difference between the current proposal and the proposal that was put on the table before. So there was significantly more disturbance in the more sensitive areas that I certainly have identified as being significant and important. Probably more important so than even the buildings is the sensitive nature of the front of this property. And in this context, that 2011 development had underground parking access ramp quite close to the neighboring property here. It had a circular lane system that superimposed or actually replaced existing roadways in areas that are heavily treed. And it involved widening of existing carriageways that otherwise were not are not being considered in this development. So,
how about the main entrance
and
to the front?
the main entrance, the one lane, one
But the one in the middle of the
gateway.
hotel.
Oh yeah, that would be a new one. However, that was at one point an original carriageway gate. We understand that. So
But, I mean, we have to look at this, we also have to look at this in context of the
Absolutely.
total proposal.
yes.
Your proposal
Mhm.
moves this over to 200 John Street, which is also Dunnington Grub. And I mean, that's a question, how does this whole access through here, yes, it was agreed that there would be a break through the wall. That break has now been moved over to the access to the 200. So, you know, we have to look at this in total, and in fact, it raises the question, we have to look at the total site. You brought, this old proposal was 2 properties, 144 and 176. And you've brought into the equation 200, right? And some speculation that maybe 580 Charlotte's been brought in.
Well, just to answer
You
that,
can speak to that.
200 John Street, which is behind the Marotta Estates, has nothing to do. That easement, there's an easement that of the 66-foot road allowance to have access to the lands behind the Marotta Estates.
Can we be, it's important, I know you
Yes,
want to
of
focus
course.
on the facts. So can we be clear if that is an easement? If we take a look at the property records, what you call an easement is actually owned, is part of the property.
It's part of 200 John Street.
Right, it's
Not
not,
the Rand Estate.
right, so it's
Right.
not an easement, it's 200 John
That's
Street.
correct.
Okay, good, just wanted to
Yes,
clear
yes,
that.
yes,
Okay.
sorry. So there is the road allowance that owned by 200 John Street that can have access to the lands behind the Rand Estates.
I'm sorry, you call it, it's a technicality, I'm sorry, but you call it.
Those are land owned by 200
Right. It is
John Street.
it is not I would like to remove the word
Okay,
road allowance.
that is fine.
It's
Yes.
land, it is 200 John Street.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So we made sure that not to interfere with any lands within the Rand Estates for access for a fire route.
Mhm.
So we decided to, at least at this point, is to make the entrance, which it's a road, eventually should be a road, but we have other plans for that. So instead of making an actual road, maybe we're working a different, we have a different proposal for that when the time comes. But to have an entrance for fire route through that. So that way we don't interfere with landscaping, landscaping within the Rand Estates.
But do you have the appropriate approvals to do that? My understanding was that you need to at least have an environmental impact study done on 200 John, that hasn't been applied for at this stage, and therefore shouldn't be included in the Brandwood estate proper that we're talking about. It can't be co-joined until that EIS has been completed.
We have no application for 200 John Street. We're analyzing how's the best way to deal with that. For an entrance, to build a driveway, have access to Rand Estate from 200 John Street. We're gonna deal with the town when the time comes to see if in effect we can do that. And this is only not to deal or build new roads through the Rand Estates for a fire route. But
It doesn't
that's
matter
what we're trying to do. It's not done yet. So allow us to deal with the town as time goes by.
Sorry, Dave, I was just going to say that the issue in my understanding is that you are using that driveway as part of your development permit here. And that, in my understanding, cannot happen until that environmental impact study is done. So it's not a question of dealing with it in the future in negotiation with the town. But again, to be respectful of the facts that get put on the table, do you have an understanding that you can do what you're doing with that driveway right now without an environmental impact study?
As of today, we have the entrance. We have two entrances into the Rand Estates. Am I right?
We have 2 existing entrances
Okay.
into the
So we can use that for a fire in and out if you wanted to. So we're trying to find another way to see if we can find an easy way not to enlarge the existing roads within the Rand Estates. So, but we have a way of doing as is. We're just trying to minimize,
Yeah.
to use the existing roads in drainage state, not to widen it, not to open, take the wall down and widen it. We're trying not to do that.
But
Yeah.
I think
But-
sorry, I shouldn't interrupt.
That's okay.
But I think it's important, we've heard Rob's story here about
Yeah.
how the proposal reduces the disturbance of the Dunnington Grub. Well, Dunnington Grub actually continues on over, or it's believed to be, and until there's a whole assessment done and everything, we won't know for sure, but the speculation is that it goes over to the edge of 200, because this is all part of the Rand properties, and so they're all clumped together.
Yes.
And on one hand, we take these two properties and we say, this is what we're doing, but our proposal to minimize the impact, we go over here. So we've lessened impact, but you've only moved the impact over to another property. Is this good? Is this bad? To be determined, okay?
I think that's
But-
a fair statement.
But
Yeah, it should be.
but the point is, like, and it's very puzzling for
Yes.
people, right? To see, if I take a look and put my focus on, I see these two properties and I see roads going out this way, out sort of the south entrance, and I see road going over to your fire lane, you call it, over here. But my focus and what the town is asked to consider is this property, which I think you'll admit doesn't work as presented. You'd have to make some changes, and I understand it's because you got some better ideas, and that's okay. But you can't put this out there and say this will work. Trust me, believe me, this is going to work. There's a process, and Maurizio was very respectful in saying he wants to follow the process. There's a process. If you're going to go through that road, you have to get the proper approvals, assessment. God forbid you run into an Aboriginal graveyard by the creek, right? That's going to change your whole plan, right? These are things, there's a process to go through and go on this. So we're asking, if that's your preferred point, we want to see all the pre-work done. And can you commit? Can you commit to doing the work?
Allow me to answer that.
Yeah.
Number one, we always follow the process. In our application, we don't have a roadway on the side through 200 John Street. So I think that things are getting very confused of telling me that I have to follow the process. We masters of that. That's all we do. We don't go sideways. So this is a suggestion we've been talking ourselves as far as the studies. Okay, we are doing it. So nothing has been done. This is just a friendly conversation that we're having.
Mhm.
So don't put in a context that we're doing the wrong thing, because we are not. So let's not confuse things.
I just
So,
also want to
can you
add
please
to that, just to
clear
put
the
it
air?
into context, and then I think we can move forward as well as if we are still drawing comparison to the 2011 plan that is the apple of everyone's eye. I would caution that it too had not gone into a site plan agreement process as we know it today.
Right.
So we're all on the same page of understanding. And the things that typically get ferreted out at that stage are, more technical details, none of which I think, for example, the placement of the buildings, I am not sure, and I would just call to question if this were the movement forward, how some of the distances for firefighting would have been met without some other way of getting access to that. So let's all just keep in mind that we in some ways have gone a little further down the road in terms of trying to answer some of those questions on the site that were not fully explored at the time when the zoning was approved for that particular development. Fair enough?
I agree wholeheartedly. And would you agree also that the town set some rigorous guidelines to say, in order to get the bylaw to move forward,
Yes.
that they said, we like this in concept, we understand it'll move a bit, and here's the guidelines, and here are things that you must do before you come forward, and that they also will have some specific referees, i.e. the Municipal Heritage Committee, that will basically adjudicate the final answer. So,
We know that.
And we
Okay.
fully appreciate
Nothing
it.
has been done as of today, which were out of line with the town recommendations.
And we realized that there was more homework. The very issue of that bylaw and the structure that was put in place, one of which was to create as much of a buffer as possible to the neighboring lands, included the preservation of the boxwood. And I'm sure that this would have been modified to address it, but that, just to give you an idea, is the location of the boxwood, and there is the location of the building.
what's the status of the boxwood now?
Well, it's still there.
Is it alive?
I'm not
We
an arborist.
met with the town. We
Sorry, I
met-
just get an answer to that? So is the boxwood alive?
I don't
Of course
know.
they are.
They are
And
alive.
someone said that they're dead. We actually had Don Zeraldo together with Bill Buchanan. He's a local arborist, which has been working with us at the Rent Estates.
Was it Don? Or,
Don Zeraldo?
no, that Donald is a different Zerl.
That's the
The,
winery.
the other was
No,
Zeraldo.
his brother. Sorry, Bob Zeraldo,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Bob Zeraldo came with us on site, together with the John,
Morley.
John Morley,
Yeah.
the landscaping architect that we have. Sorry, and we have tied up. We actually, they were all mixed together. So Bob Zeraldo went. He took one by one. We tied them up nicely, and they're all there, waiting to where to be removed. So nothing's dead. They're all alive. They've been protected. So don't know who's saying they're not alive.
I think we can move on that,
Yes.
because there is a difference of opinion on that matter.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's where the problem
David,
is.
I know we want to move on to, I think height was a.
Well, I think it's part
It's
of
part
this.
of this,
yeah.
but I wanted to go back to one thing, again. along
Yes.
The focus of clearing up misunderstandings. We got off on a bit of a tangent here, all very useful. But the discussion started with, Benny, I think he was saying that you hadn't been able to present what you're planning to do to Municipal Heritage Committee. And I wanted just to probe that, because I'm trying to understand. I've been to 2 meetings that Mr. Regato has been to where presentations have been made. So were there other forums you were looking for? Were there other opportunities? Were there other materials that you plan to submit that haven't been done? And I'm just curious as to why that hasn't happened.
Well, the way we usually, and this is not the first time that we deal with municipalities, and we always deal with Heritage Committee and all these agencies that the municipalities have. Usually we do proposal, we meet with Heritage Committee in a room like we are, and we expose what we want to do, we ask them what you think and make changes and to work with them. As of today, that didn't happen. So we just had 600 people show up to look at what we presented, which we're not ready for it, basically. So, and it was a chaos. So we didn't meet, we didn't have to my recollection, we did not have those meetings yet. One-on-one with the Heritage Committee.
But they made,
We actually requested it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and it still did not happen yet.
who did you request it to?
To the town, I think you were.
I believe Maurizio requested it, and again, without Maurizio being here, but my understanding is that I believe the council has agreed to put together a process that would involve your organization, SOAR, and the members of the Municipal Heritage Committee to get together in a public forum to work with us in a workshop type of environment. That was my understanding. I could be wrong, but that was what I understand was
And
approved to
you
go
don't,
ahead.
you don't remember who was orchestrating this, who was,
Orchestrating?
well, who, you were talking to someone at the town, I mean, so I
No,
assume.
no, no, we usually, the Heritage Committee meetings happen before you go to the public. So that way, when you go to the public, you go with something concrete, something that makes sense. That didn't happen with us. So for some reason, this process has been sabotaged, and we just went in front of a public meeting without going through that.
I want to, again,
Yes.
you're sensitive to information being misrepresented, sabotaged, the proper procedural guidelines in terms of references. Committee meetings are held in public. That's
Nothing about committee meeting.
that's Municipal Heritage Committee. If they sit in public. So nothing sabotaged. That is the process. If you make private delegations to the Municipal Heritage Committee, I leave that to the committee to determine. But I don't know that is how often that's done. But the formal process is in the public.
Yes, but it is very difficult to come up with a design, especially with the importance of Grand Estates, to come in front of 600 people to come to a conclusion of how the building should be designed. That doesn't work that way. The process that usually happens in any municipalities, and also Niagara-on-the-Lake, for what I understand, Rob, if I'm wrong, correct me, that there's been in the past meetings at the town, not in private, at the town, okay, between Heritage Committee members, and projects were proposed in order to work with them to come up with a proper design. Then once everything has been pretty well done, then you go in front of the public to show them what they came up with.
Well, have those requests that you've made been denied to have private meetings?
We didn't have it as of today. My understanding, that was supposed to do that, but then didn't happen. It ended up in front of 600 people. Basically, that's what my understanding was, okay? We have history on that because when we built subdivision in St. David's, we did meet at the town with the Heritage Committee to work out the design of the homes, the elevation, the colors, and all these things before we went in front of the public.
Before it was public?
Yes, yes, they give us comments
I think that was-
on elevation.
That might have been urban design committee.
Yes,
I think
on
so. Urban design.
same
Another-
urban designing, Heritage Committee is the same. You still meet with people.
And it's not uncommon,
Yes,
uncommon, and
that's right.
it's actually recommended that projects go to the Municipal Heritage Committee, but they go on an exploratory way.
That's correct.
And they make some presentations and they ask for feedback. That's done at the
We
public
didn't have
meeting.
it, we didn't have it,
No, it's done, wait, no,
Not
I.
not traditionally.
Well,
Can you please comment on that, so that way maybe you know
I
more
just,
than
I
me?
just want to finish the one example.
Yes.
There was an example of, if you're, well, you would be, because I think it was Cortec that did it, which is the medical arts center that is by the school, Crossroads School. A few months,
22 and 55.
yeah, they went to Municipal Heritage Committee.
No, they've never been to Municipal Heritage Committee.
Oh, sorry, you're right, it was UDC, because they don't have to go, yes, but it would be the similar process, that they went to UDC, and I apologize.
No,
I'm
it's,
sorry, guys. They went to UDC as a delegation, right? And I happened to be there for that. It was a totally public meeting. They then went back to the UDC after getting their feedback from UDC with their formal request, because UDC is going to make recommendations in their minutes to council, and staff is going to work with those. But it is a public process, and you may or may not have met, and I know that there were meetings in May of last year that Mr. Marotta was at, which talked about the heritage designation.
Yes.
And at that particular meeting, he made a commitment to provide a timeline for the heritage designation of the property, which timeline, almost a year later, hasn't been seen yet. But that meeting went forward because you were interested in the heritage designation. And then you had this other meeting, which is part of the process. A series of recommendations that came out of that meeting were made, and I assume that you're acting on those recommendations. You accept the recommendations, and that you are preparing your response.
We have been and we are in support of the heritage recommendation. We didn't say no. We have no issues with that, with the existing buildings on site. We never said we don't want to. We actually recommend that. So, don't know where the problem is.
And so one of their big recommendations was the establishment of a peer review and a peer review process. So you support that. Now, and I think you would also recognize that seeing as the Municipal Heritage Committee is one of the key decision makers in this whole thing, and especially when it has to do with heritage.
Why do you say no, Rob?
Because we don't make decisions. When I'm speaking, I don't believe they make decisions. They make recommendations. They're a committee that is an advisory committee to council, and to every council member.
So you're familiar with the official plan and the specific provisions for the Randwood Estate, where it explicitly states and gives them the power of the authority of approval of the site plan?
I am not a planner, nor am I a lawyer, so I can't really speak to that one aspect that you're narrowing down in on because of the fact that it was put into a bylaw. I can't imagine any of the members of the committee making anything other than a recommendation in their capacity as a volunteer group that are there to serve the council.
Okay, so I think I would encourage, Benny, have you read the official plan as it relates to this property?
No, I did not.
And you obviously haven't read the official plan.
Only in context with what the planners who are working on this along with the town.
I really encourage you to do that, because that's a large disconnect, because and it's an amendment to the official plan, it's not a bylaw. Okay, there is a bylaw, but there's an amendment to the official plan which sets out these requirements, that sets out that I could just put it out here, that your archaeological assessment has to be done, right? That you're being asked to consider a site approval, and no archaeological assessment has been provided. But these things, and you say, why are people so upset? It's because these things are explicitly in the official plan.
Yes.
So I encourage you to read the official plan. Then you might understand why some people are concerned, because the requirements of that official plan in their minds is not being met.
No,
David,
I think that there is some kind of a twisting things, because number one, the archaeological assessment has been done on site.
And
So
you have
yes, we have it.
Could you have you provided?
Well, maybe what I might
It's
suggest,
public.
if I might suggest, I mean, some of these questions certainly should be directed more towards the planners that are involved with this project, because this is fair to say. I know Benny's had lots of experience as a developer, and I have as an architect, but I think some of these issues you're speaking to are dealing with procedural issues that are really out of our area of expertise to speak to you fairly. I mean, fairly in both parties.
But to be
Yeah.
fair, it was the planner that asked to meet with us. We were clear, it was the planner, Mr. Regato, who in open council asked to meet with us, and it
Yes.
is the planner we directed our letter to agreeing to meet. And we're here today meeting with who you put forward. So if the right people aren't in the room, that's maybe a problem.
Possibly, yeah,
But having said that,
yeah.
we as David's mentioned, we have heard Mr. Regato say in the past that the architectural assessment has been completed. It's been asked for, we still haven't seen it. Is it done, and can that be something? It would go a long way to building trust and dealing with
Yeah.
this disconnect.
Well,
If some of these documents are put on the table so that everybody can see them.
If I may suggest, then let's get that on a future agenda if we can, and we'll get the right people in front of the table.
But if
for
it's
that.
done, why does it have to be on an agenda? Why don't we just produce it?
I really can't speak to that in fairness, so I will have to defer.
Well,
we
the only
can-
reason why I called for this meeting, because there were two questions asked. That, I don't know if it was you or somebody else that wanted to ask.
I
So,
don't,
didn't talk about planning, the only thing you asked that you want to meet with us, two reasons. One, why we changed the design of what was approved in 2011, and two, the boundary of 200 John Street. That's what was asked. So we are to answer.
Okay.
So can you please stick with that?
And
If we knew was different,
Yeah,
then would have brought the
I-
planner.
we never
no, no,
received
no, no,
an
no.
agenda,
So-
in short, you
Well,
know, and so
okay,
we're
but-
doing our best that we can, and we'll.
Yeah.
And,
we'll
and
get
fair, and fair enough, but, the point is that these questions set the context of the design. I think, it would be helpful, and I'd like your commitment to read, it's kind of the rule book, right? We have the original design, the Randwood, and that was it, and then the council put the rules around what this project's to look like. That's the context, and now we're changing the design. So that's why this discussion goes into that territory. Okay, so we're saying you don't wanna deal with that, that's fine, you're not in a position to deal with it. But we'll come back to the proposals that you've changed, but understand, we'll keep coming back to what I call sometimes the rules of the game. And that'll be referenced. and
This
it-
is not a game, this is very serious, so
I-
let's,
But I was just making an analogy on that, as
Yes.
far as that we're given guidance
Yes.
in the official plan on how to evaluate proposals and changes to proposals. So if you put a patio in the backyard, the official plan gives us guidance on whether that's acceptable or not. So I'd like to talk about your plan and your proposal, and how, and in other ways I had put it was, how does that affect the residents, and how does it affect the heritage? Because what I referred to as the official plan and the language in there was put in there to do just that, to protect those two things. So.
we asked to meet with Heritage Committee, regardless if they don't want to make a decision or not, either decision or recommendation, to us it makes no difference. We want to deal with them, we want to meet with them, we want to work with them in order to come up with a solution to all the unanswered questions that they're floating around. So to us, it makes no difference if they're decision maker or recommendations. Only we ask to have our planners, our architects, to meet with the professionals, that they can talk the same language. And then when that is done, they make a recommendation to us, work with them to the recommendation, with term limits, of course, depends on what discussion it is. And then we go to open public to say, we came up with this. That's all we're asking. Between what I said and what is happening, there is all these unanswered questions and misunderstandings, policies, and terms of reference and all this thing. This is strictly for the experts. So our meeting today is to show our good faith
Mhm.
and our good way of dealing with everyone that has concerns and answer questions. If you want to talk about technicality, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect either.
So then,
So let's make that clear.
maybe take it this way then, in that whether it's the right form or not, or whether it's been managed the best way or not, or whether the final recommendations have been deferred or not, both UDC and MHC have produced a series of recommendations. Both those committee members have said specific things, made specific comments, some quite pointed on the project. Are you at a point now where you're prepared to go back to one of those committees or to planning staff with suggested changes to the project that would deal with some of those committees, and what are those changes?
We are doing that. The only thing I wanted to do, want to show you two first what we're gonna have topics, talking about technicality rather than trying to show you which direction we're going. So that way at least we have two of you to see where we at, right? And then we go to where we have to go. We will go anywhere that it's needed to appease everyone and to make sure that we all have a life going forward instead of all this upsetting and all these stories. So let's leave it to the experts. Us today just a friendly meeting
Mhm.
and to show you what do we have. Even we have some elevations, which we changed from the way it was before, but we're not prepared then. So now we're getting there. After our meeting, if you have time, I would like to walk the rendering sets together to show you exactly where we located the building and the effect that will have if we do what we're suggesting, and the effect that will have if we're going to build what was approved in 2011. At times on papers you really don't see. Visiting the site you can actually see it, and I always said to everybody, if somebody wants to visit the site, I have no problem. All they have to do, call me, and I'll be with them. Could be anybody. So let's not to complicate things.
What's your availability? I don't know. This is new to me.
If you have time. If
Yeah,
not, it's
yeah,
fine.
It's not the best time
It's
for
not the
it,
best day or the time.
but we may
You
take
can
it
do
up.
tomorrow,
Yes.
the day after, doesn't
This is,
matter.
if we can start a process.
Not an Easter weekend,
then-
but the.
No.
Yeah.
Whatever
I know.
tomorrow,
No,
whatever you want to do
It's
it.
very much appreciated.
It's
Yeah,
Easter
I
for
mean-
me too, so I'm
And-
there available if it needs to.
Understood.
And that's the spirit that
Yeah.
we want. Now,
Yeah.
I think you're here, you wanna talk to, there's just one clarification that I want, and that's that, and just bear with me as I'm kind of on the side that you don't want me to go to, but which is that this peer review process, like you said you want to work with the experts. I take it you recognize the Municipal Heritage Committee as the expert
Yes.
in that area. They've asked for a peer review, some debate here in terms of the approval, but I encourage you to read the documentation, that they have significant influence on the final decision. We can agree on that. So I assume that you would agree that they should be intimately involved with the selection of the peer review architect and the terms of reference. Do you take any exception to them being?
I have no issues with that.
I
Okay.
believe,
We said we have no
I
problem.
believe through Maurizio, who is through the town representing the application, he's expressed his willingness to work with the Municipal Heritage Committee as a whole, and with council, and with a agreed peer
Okay.
group.
And you recognize that this process is gonna take time. It's gonna take, we could be talking in the order of months for the selection. I mean, nobody's talked about terms of reference yet, right? So the selection, them doing their peer review, and then that being reflected in the various reports. So you're prepared to wait for that work
If
to
there
be
is a
done?
willingness from both parties, things can happen. If there is an agenda of delaying things, and then of course it will take months. But we are prepared at any given time to expedite the process, meet with all the necessary consultants hired by the town staff to meet and find a solution to any problems that may be. So we have no issues with that.
But even if that happens as fast as it can, Benny, we're going to be over our 150-day clock on this application, and it would be really helpful, I think, for everyone if they could hear you say that you're prepared to put that aside and let's move through this process. Everybody can do what they need to do on the assumption that both sides, town and yourselves, have to make this happen within a reasonable period of time. But if we're moving towards a date sometime in May where it all comes to a crashing halt, then are we wasting our time?
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I don't know, and I counsel about a week and a half ago or so, I heard Council Deteriorate expressing this 150 days. Based on what we've experienced through some of the residents of Niagara, through Facebook and all those things, we have an issue because a lot of things have been said which are offensive. They are out of class completely. We've not been answering to any of those comments because we don't want to go that low and start dealing with those type of comments. So we also want to see from SOAR and some others, I'm sure there's a lot more people that they want to deal with this. They want to see a solution. We want to see some cooperation from the community with us, either to SOAR or to other community members, whatever. And the last thing we want to do is to appeal it. We don't want to do that. But if we see people attacking the family, my family, if you were in my situation, would you deal with these people? We just go to appeal it and let others deal with it. So we need to stop this nonsense. And as long as we see, or I see, people working with me to come up to a solution, I have no reason why I should appeal it. But if people don't want to work with me in a good faith, then how can someone ask me, don't do that? It's like going towards a suicidal and saying, I'm gonna keep doing it when I have a way that it can be easier and I don't have to deal with this nonsense. So it's up to the community, or to, in this case, you two gentlemen, to try to put things together, and we can work as a team. I have no issues with that.
And it's really a shame that those kind of personal comments are there. I know that SOAR doesn't go with that. As we said, we're total techno. We don't even the two of us here don't even
know how.
But so I don't even know the stories. But there's no place for it. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
But I'm facing it to me and my family. It's a little disturbing.
And I understand that, and I just want you to be absolutely confident that. Not that I think that's going on. It's a shame, but that's not what SOAR is about. And SOAR, and we're gonna come right, I'm gonna do a segue if I could here, we're about the responsible development of the site. We're not against development. We've got a starting point, the Romance Inn. We're for responsible development, and we have some real considerations that we're weighing on that, and that is respect of the heritage of the area. And there's a built heritage, there's a history, there's a landscape heritage, all those things. And it's a broader area because these two properties is half of the original Randus, well, less than half because some other parts disappeared. But and also that respecting the neighbors. So that's my segue to go back and to say your proposal, if that's okay.
Well, I don't know, as long if SOAR works with me into solve all this confusion, I'm there with them to work with them all the way. We want to see probably even better than what you want to see, but to work with as a team, because if you don't, things ain't gonna work. I mean, there's people, like there is next to the real estate on this side of real estate, Mr. and Mrs. McCarter, they bought the Romans home. And they invested so much time and so much money in the property, they made it the most beautiful place in Niagara-on-the-Lake. But you have to allow people to do it. So you can, like yesterday, and I wish that other people in Niagara-on-the-Lake would do the same what Mr. and Mrs. Arthur did next to the real estate where took over the Mrs. Roman's property. They did a beautiful job. People drive by, they look at it, and they it's amazing. So we want to do the same or better, but work with us.
And Benny, and we appreciate that, and as David said, and I'll reiterate, neither David nor I see any place for sniping and vicious attacks. We need to manage this in a responsible manner. But having just let me say though, we're a group, and it's a group of volunteers, and we're two representatives of that group. And I think to your point about working with us, we do not want, as David said off the top, we're not here negotiating on behalf of anybody. We're here as two representatives from a number of people who live in the community.
Of course.
I think moving your process along and coming back to the 150 days, I don't think there's been anybody involved in the social media sniping that you're dealing with on a professional basis to do any of the things that have to be done to meet this deadline. And so let's separate the people in the community that are doing this stuff from what has to happen to make
Let's
this
press ahead.
work. And I think what I'm concerned about is we've got half an hour left. If there's things that we want to look at and show, we should probably do that.
Yeah.
And then maybe look at making a couple of wrap-up
Well,
statements.
Okay, you have it already. Okay.
Yeah, I just thought
I agree with what you said, and when I say to work with you, I don't mean you too.
I
I
understand.
mean with
Yeah.
SOAR, the whole group, through you or through others.
But we're also sensitive, Benny, that SOAR is not an official representative of the community either.
No.
Oh, it's a
We
group.
are
It's
a
a
number
group
of
of people.
people, and there's a lot of us, but
But
we're
also,
not here pretending to be something we aren't.
yeah, but we have some emails here through Facebook, through some SOAR members, where it's talking about 7-story hotel, which we never mentioned, it was never discussed, that we had buried some material of the town, trying to get the town out of, without knowing it, which is that's not the case, that we have changed some of the streams in the property, which we never touched. That we had cut down about 130 trees. Don't know where that came from, because that did not happen. They mentioned about the Fen Court, the Chinese restaurant down on Queen Street, where they said we bought it and we're making look the area very bad, so we don't deal with it. Well, that's not the case. So we have archaeological issue. We spent $2 million as of today.
Could I just, in the...
I mean, it's a joke.
Are they, all right.
That's
and-
from
and-
SOAR members.
SOAR,
Oh, part of the group.
there's no membership, there's no charter.
Part of the group.
I don't know that, I couldn't tell you
Anyway,
that.
this is the wrong time to
But-
discuss about this. Let's
Yeah.
do this.
I think maybe that's, I mean,
We got a camera on this?
can you see it right? I mean, again, I will caution, this is starting, this is a preliminary, it is for review, that we are meeting again to discuss this with a group, a team. So this is early on, but it's certainly the approach that we've taken is to revisit the hotel and minimize and create. I think that the significant message was to help articulate the hotel in such a way that it would not appear to be as high, and to be more sympathetic with the relationship that it has with the Randwood House and its adjacency to other buildings, and in general to create a softer statement. So we are working on articulating the hotel significantly to reduce it, albeit that it still has a 6th story. It is more central, so therefore its appearance and impact is less than what was originally presented. And we've done efforts to enhance, although not take up more real estate, because this is always the challenge. So we had originally a Plinth Design that incorporated a convention hall as well as all of the ground floor functions, and rather than expand that, we're trying to build and create a hotel shape above it that ties in with that plinth. And the plinth is another method for grounding the building on the site by strengthening its base. But this, we feel, is a nicer blend of that, and we feel that this has gone a long way. We've been very, very conscious of views that people might have from their rooms of adjacent properties. And I think not at this time, but we'll definitely show and demonstrate how we've been very, we've created screening opportunities so that would be minimized, if at all, if there are situations at all where that still remains. We have taken the notion of introducing more landscaping and planting into the building itself to help soften its appearance. And so we feel we've made a lot of, that's me speaking architecture. There are other aspects of the development that will be presented to other parties that are a part of that team. But ultimately, the intentions were to minimize the impact of this, but recognizing that its central location, being away from the neighboring areas, is still the strong point that we continue to work with, feeling that it's still the best solution for the site as a whole. So that's sort of an overview to where we're going. We're still continuing to work on that. I don't want to belabor it, but the Randwood House is integral in terms of its uses to the overall the hotel program. So this is something that has always been in mind, but certainly we want to make that very clear to everyone that the program, the spa, and the uses that are related to, that are associated with the hotel, make the Randwood House viable. And that's what our challenge has always been, so that heritage in isolation can't be successful unless you can reanimate and use the properties and their spaces in a way that's respectful yet allows for them to create revenue and to become used by people. If they're sitting there as ghost buildings and can't be enjoyed by the public and by patrons of the resort, then we've lost something. We've lost something as a culture and as a community. So I think that the efforts have been put forward to preserve those buildings and to give them new functions that will be able to be preserved and will allow the grounds to be left as undisturbed as possible. Where we have continued to work with it, that is to create an attractive backdrop in the around the hotel that we feel will be attractive. It doesn't have to be, nor should it be, an exact replica of style to the Dunningham Grubb design. In fact, by choice, we have chosen a different order and style so that it respects what was there already, as opposed to what is an intervention that is representative of the new use of the site. And in that saying, we've tried to preserve as much of this area without disturbing it, and we feel that we've achieved that. I think the only other thing that we can do is sort of show you some ideas of where we're going with the development.
Well, if we could just
Yeah,
comment
yeah,
on
questions, yeah.
when I look at this, so we're looking at the site plan.
Yes.
A couple questions that come up is this area here appears to be patio space. And so I go back to the question and said, how does that impact the residential neighbors between the building? You've got a building, patio space, residence. What impact do you think that has on the residents?
And just the corollary to that, to put a fine point on it, my guess is, looking at the previous site plan, is there's about 10,000 square feet of meeting space on the main floor. What's the largest event number of people that can be accommodated that are spilling out onto that patio? I think that it just goes to the noise and possible
The
confusion.
event space is not 10,000, it's 5,000.
Okay, but I'd like to come to the point of the patio. I think Lyle was just trying to emphasize that there could be a lot of people.
Yes.
But in the previous design, outside space was in front, and that was very deliberate. That was very deliberate. It was part of the design to let the buildings be a buffer to any event, and they also minimize the outside space. So I'd like to ask you, what impact does this have on the neighbors?
I think that, to begin with, the notion of building a wall, which is essentially what may have been the approach to create a wall, and then to have activities within that wall. Some of the activities probably would be closer before, in the 2011, than the activities we're looking at to have outside now.
I'd encourage you
to go
back and
take
ask that question. As we said, we're not negotiating it.
And I can't obviously speak for the architect or the team that we're looking at it. And to be fair to the whole the premise behind the other development had perhaps a different type of operational agenda than what is here as well. In fairness, that's something that may or may not have been why things were arranged the way they were. I appreciate the concern that you might have. You have a reception area which we have located, and I will at another time, although I didn't bring it because I wasn't prepared for that question, I will bring some ground floor plans that will show how the so we say the conferencing spaces on the ground floor, how the reception areas that relate to that are actually opening out into this courtyard for the main one. There is a secondary one here. It has a patio that is facing that way, which is the same as the 2011.
And that's not my question,
No.
right? Yeah,
How so?
my question, and that was the design before.
Yeah, it was.
The projection of sound was going this way, right?
Yeah, so that would be, this smaller one has that.
Right.
Then the larger of the two conference areas and the restaurant, this larger one, it has its reception, so that's the gathering hall, crush hall, and then the doors opening are facing to the east. And you open out into this courtyard area.
Right.
So that courtyard area actually would be deflecting sound out in this direction and less so towards the existing.
But this is residential as well. The
How-
question,
Well, it may be, but that is a different set of criteria for that determination. So you're setting a criteria that assumes that something here cannot address that separately. Because this is,
we don't
future
know what's there, which is one of the questions, right?
That's
And
right.
so you have to assume that it could be an estate lot, right? It could be a subdivision, but the point is, and
understand.
this was in the
Yeah,
design,
that's
was
fair.
this was once all residential and commercial was put in,
Mhm.
and you have to weigh into the fact that I have to be respectful
of that.
of the neighbors.
Okay.
And so we would ask questions like, do you think anybody would have an outdoor event?
No, there's no other events.
And I can take your word for that while you own it, it won't. But the next owner, the design, to me, don't you think this invites an outdoor event?
I think that the landscape should be attractive, you'd want to be able to go out there. I don't know how many people we're talking
Okay.
about that would be involved in that.
But-
That's something that's,
Would you want a wedding every week in your backyard?
well, I can only speak to what is happening other places where immediately across the road from King Street, this establishment here will be having a very, very large garden and area that will have a wall not unlike the wall that we have, and will have outdoor functions on it.
And that land was zoned,
Well, it's
its history is it was industrial.
actually was industrial. yes.
Industrial, right.
So now.
But this was, the deal was that this being allowed to be commercial, right, was that it would respect the residential areas. That's a different discussion. But anyways, you've heard that
I recognize
point.
that. We'll definitely take
The other observation is
Mhm.
that there are roads that go back through the back.
Mhm.
And where do those roads go?
Which ones?
Just this one, this entrance, where does that, well, particularly that one. So,
That's what we were talking. The fire exit that we have right now, it's through there.
Yeah, this.
Not an issue.
This fire exit, and if this cannot happen, then this gets developed as a road. Unfortunately, though, we're trying to preserve this by not widening this, but that's what we'll be forced to do.
that is going into ultimately a residential district, right?
If this happen for fire route, in case, this is an access from the back. Eventually, right now, we don't need it. The only thing we're trying to do to be transparent, that everybody understands what we would like to see in the future. This doesn't have to happen, and this doesn't have to happen either.
Okay.
So,
But the previous proposal had all traffic onto John Street.
Okay, can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Because I think this is where we're getting into the level of detail that was presented and approved for zoning did not take you to the level of a site plan agreement. And in that context, I don't believe, and this is purely speculation, so that the way that emergency access would be delivered or backup alternatives. There's many examples in the town that I'm aware of anyway that have provision for firefighting access that is the primary means of gaining access to a property. And we could assume by what we're doing that the primary will be coming off of John Street. There are situations that we all hope don't happen, but in any event, if they do, we anticipate that the town will be requiring some other way of gaining access to the property. And this happens all the time. And
does, but
subdivisions as well are the same in that.
The real issue here isn't emergency access. The real issue is the half dozen semi-trailers that are going to show up once a week delivering food and supplies.
So you're thinking that this, or at least the concern at this point, is that will this become the heavy truck delivery? Is this the concern?
Well, I wasn't trying to diminish David's concerns, but I think, the commercial
we can
traffic on
clarify
a business this large.
The whole point is in anything that's changed from what was there, and it would have been there's no different rules here.
No.
For if the Romance Inn, if it had any changes,
They would be
right,
required
they
to.
would be measured against the same yardsticks
And
that
fair.
I'm asking you, and those yardsticks are given
Yeah.
in the bylaw, and they're also given in the official plan.
So if I'm to understand, then, I don't want to, read in anything else differently than this, but if the concern is that this becomes another commercial access, is that what I'm hearing? Then that would not be favorable in terms of this approach. But if it was strictly emergency access, used only in the event of all worst case scenarios happening that the site cannot be accessed from John Street, then that would be less of a concern.
Again, I'm not here to negotiate or
No,
to say what
but
the answer. I'm
just so I'm understanding.
I'm
Okay.
I'm trying to reinforce that earlier
Those
question,
concerns.
which is to say no. And
What's
don't,
happening? Yeah.
this whole concept. You're trying to build a profitable, and then they said at what cost
Yeah.
to others,
And what
right?
happens?
And that is the balance that has to be sought.
Okay.
And so I'm just giving some
Yeah, no, listen.
examples.
And again, I think delivery of supplies has been a concern. We saw in the previous proposal how that delivery appeared to be, or at least for the ramp here, appeared to be coming in off of this east side, west side of the site, or at least there was a large car ramp that was less than 5 meters away from the property line, that was accessing into the underground parking lot. I don't know whether or not that would handle as well servicing. That's something I can look into.
Again,
this is water over the
as we
bridge.
said, yeah,
But
exactly.
there is, to my way of thinking, we've gotten further away with our actual intended delivery of supplies so that this occurs here.
Yeah.
And it's further in, hence, hopefully not
Actually, the
as-
supply for the hotel, it's here.
Yeah, that's it.
It's not in the back.
Anyways,
So-
but it begs
Yeah.
the question
Those-
for the back entrance. But it's that kind of
Yes.
how does this
What's
design,
going
whatever it
on?
is, right? Whatever it is,
Yes.
how does it impact the neighbors?
What is your name again? Sorry.
David Bell.
David. See, when you just commented on this patio in the back,
Mhm.
okay? That's what you want to hear from
Yeah.
people like you or the Heritage Committee or whomever. So that way we can work together
Mhm.
and maybe remove those pavers and do all landscaping.
Yep.
It's not an issue. That's the reason why we need to meet and talk. I have no issues. I personally, the landscaping architect did that, John Morley.
John?
And personally, I'm not happy with the landscaping to suit those pavers, so I'm not in favor of that. So that will change, but at times you put something on paper, to meet with others and talk about how can we make in a way it's payable to everybody. So that's what we're doing.
Okay.
So I'm happy that you commented on that.
Okay, now I think we're really short for time, and we did want to see, one of the elephants in the room is the height. So I think the elevations is a critical.
Yes.
is a
So yeah,
critical
we have
point.
something that maybe you can
Yeah, I think
have an
certainly
idea.
that gives you sort of a feel where originally.
I
which-
turn it around for
this
the
way?
audience.
All right, well, I mean.
I can
certainly,
read upside down. It's okay.
Just to give you a sense of it, the original proposal would be for a block of building that would have been 6 stories that went all the way along to these outer points.
Where the original proposal?
That would be what the application has seen right now. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
okay. So this
sorry.
is a different.
This is something
okay.
where the direction that we are moving towards at the present time to create stepping occurring that would definitely articulate the building so that it's fragmented into smaller blocks. And so that's certainly the direction that we are taking with development. So,
Maybe just push the top down, Rob, so we can see on the side.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
thanks.
yeah, it's curled up here.
No problem. Here's a-
There we go. Yeah. So, I mean, these are just some models that we've been working with to help with that. The articulation in the back, probably less in the public realm, have 2 pylon elements that are tight to the inner courtyard of the site. The original conference facility was a large appendage. It's now tucked in under the building more so it has less mass in terms of its statement as a whole. And the type of, we're getting now into more detail about the character elements of the site, but the entrance and the grand hall effect that would come through the entire hotel is being expressed more in these further developments. So that's sort of the direction that we're taking, and we intend to have a presentation that would include that.
Okay.
Just one quick question, sorry, David. The
Sure.
lower level, the main level, how high is the main level?
Floor to floor, we are trying to maintain so that, we can get, there's a lot of, it's sort of like building a battleship, that you have a lot of interstitial space required for connecting the hotel aspects with the rest of the facility. But we're looking at this point in time, still at a 20-foot floor to floor. For finished floor to the beginning of the residential or the hotel suite floor is 20 feet.
Which is where the misunderstanding on the 7 floors is probably coming from, because if you, a standard floor height, you're in the 7th floor range when you take a 20-foot lower floor plus 6 standard
Understandable.
floors. Okay.
But I mean, if you're going to build a hotel, you want to have kind of spaces that are in keeping with the hierarchy of the spaces that are involved in the site. So it would be inappropriate and certainly not conducive to the character we're trying to create to have a really traditional one-story thing.
And
But you
David,
understand.
David said this better than I ever could. I mean, I come out of the hotel industry. I don't disagree that this is a hotel that works for the hotelier, but it needs to be a hotel that works for the community if it's going to happen.
And I just, we'll share, I don't know if you probably won't get this picture.
Yes,
You've got
certainly.
that.
No, yeah.
As you can, we will do something along similar lines to show the variation between what you're seeing here.
But one takes a look at something like this from 2 perspectives. One is, it doesn't appear to compare the Romance Inn, but in fact, the Romance Inn, with the exception of 3 parapets, again by my calculation, the three parapets were over in the back, exceeded the height of the top of the Romance Inn. There were only three parapets. If you know the design.
Sorry.
This is the Romance Inn. The Romance Inn, the prior proposal.
Oh, you're referring to the the house, the mansion?
Essentially, the house that you see there, which is the Rand Estate,
That's
is the
correct.
same height as the Romance Inn.
As the proposed Romance Inn.
Oh,
So I'm doing a comparison of, to say,
yes,
from a heritage, and there's
Yeah.
two questions I ask, right, which is that this height,
mhm.
there's been a lot of confusion about stories. I mean, the official plan states that this was a 3-story building. Even Leah Wallace wrote in her assessment for the town
Yes.
that it was a 3-story building. And just as you take exception to being a 7-story building, it's the mansard roofs that were built for this. But the historic and sort of that context was you had a project which was
Yep.
on that scale from an elevation. You get different conclusions when you look at an elevation or you look at a plan straight down, right?
And you do, and I think even more so, you get a different sense of how different buildings and their massings fit into the context of all of the other features of the site. This to my mind is not necessarily the way that we envision how the hotel will be perceived, nor how Randwood will be perceived relevant to the hotel, because of the spatial relationship of how you move through the site, your size, scale, and a lot of what I think we're moving towards right now, and hope to have, would be a video that would show how one might experience entering from John Street as a member of the public or as a guest, and how they move through the site, understanding that there is natural, there's vegetation, there's trees, there's natural plantings, there's formal gardens, there's an axial relationship as you come in from John Street to see the Randwood House and understand how wonderful that connection is. All those things that we wouldn't want to detract from. So, but when you see that movement and you see how little of an impact this hotel has on the experience of coming into, so that you come upon and discover elements in the site, because the site is large enough to do that. Unlike a block in a residential or a commercial development where every block has a direct connection with the building beside it. This is a large enough lot that you come upon objects that are surrounded by landscape and have enough sufficient buffer that you experience them individually. And that's how our whole process of taking that same idea that was instilled in the Dunnington Grub design by coming in on axis, moving on off of axis, and then reacquainting yourself with the entrance to the original Rand House. We think that's amazing, and we want to preserve that. We want to take that same processional idea and continue that in and move into yet another grand entrance experience that you move and experience once you arrive in this natural clearing that exists already there.
But you don't think that this will dominate?
No,
It will dominate. This is what you'll see from the common.
I don't believe that you will see that or even recognize it unless you are actually said, oh, look over there, because of the amount of landscaping there. That's my personal belief, and I hope that through the ability to recreate as much as we can, we'll be able to demonstrate that.
And again, from another perspective, so how this fits in the heritage, it would be argued that it dominates the heritage buildings of the area. But also from the point of view of the neighbors, the view from a top floor on those back properties, there is no opportunity for vegetative break or anything to buffer the group, because you have a garage which goes right to the property. So again, we ask the question, are the neighbors considered in the height of the land? Or the height of the property. And this was a big issue that set this 3-story maximum on the previous design, was that 3 stories was an overlook issue as well.
Okay, can I speak to that? Because really, this is one where we'll go through the exercise and show that that same idea of just saying 3 stories is relevant to how far the new building is away from the property line and the angles of sight, line of sight. This is all driven by line of sight. And I won't, I'll go through that exercise by having, if this building were only 3 stories high, and if it were 4 stories high, shall we say, and we looked at the angles that you have from the same building, now farther away from the same property lines, what you're going to find comparatively is they may have the same line of sight as this 3-story hotel. So this is where I think if we could show that the impact on views, privacy of the existing residences, which we absolutely respect, that would be diminished by keeping the building further away, and that its height, and I'll speak specifically to the 5th floor because we were teetering on whether or not we could achieve that very issue of lines of sight. By moving the massing in as you see right now, so that we move and pinch the center area, we create a plaza or patio area or a flat roof area that creates that blockage so that when you are in suites that are on the 6th floor, your line of sight cannot look down into the neighbors. It looks way out onto the horizon, considerably longer and farther than we had in the original design. And those are the kinds of things that we've taken into account to preserve lines of sight for our neighbors.
But you're saying there's still more work to be done.
I'm saying that there's work to be done to demonstrate that this solution achieves what you may have seen or been relayed to you as being the solution in a 3-story solution, we can achieve in the 5-story solution by working out the geometry. And if we fail in that, we will. And you will look at
5-story.
In a 5-story, yes, because
Is it changed to a 6-story or a 5-story?
the areas where we have a window that's looking straight out is 5 stories. I just finished saying how the 6-story is moved in. Sorry,
But
David.
okay, so
Yeah,
no,
so
no, no,
I-
good
but
to know.
I- I'll
Good
go through
to know.
that.
So you are in a process
of working on how
of-
we are creating the screening that we
and-
need to have.
and you're working this process, and this is to be revealed. So
Yes.
there's work still going
Absolutely.
on, and it'll take time for us to digest this. Okay, yeah, that's. I mean, I can't comment on what we
But
can't see, but
it's.
but the process and the real process is to say that you are considering
Yeah, we
the
recognize that this is an
neighbors
issue.
and the
Absolutely.
heritage. Right.
Absolutely.
No, that's the.
Well, we are doing that.
I think that's fair, but I want to come back on timing again, because, oops,
Yeah, we're done
Did we
now.
lose?
Okay.
okay, we just hit the camera.
We nudged it a little bit.
I want to come back on timing, because there's a lot here that has been done, there's a lot more that has to be done.
Yeah.
At the MHC meeting, Mr. Regato and Ms. Wallace asked for a delay in starting the peer review until after a revised heritage impact assessment was put in. There's work here that's being done that's going to be changed, and I don't want to belabor this 150-day clock, but I'm concerned about the 150-day clock, and I just want to get a sense for
Yeah.
how we're all looking at that.
Being only one in a team, I know that we've been working very hard to try and push us forward to achieve what we anticipate to be major concerns for the architecture. There are other members on the team that are working equally as hard to answer some of the questions that have come up, or all of the questions ultimately.
So
Where I think Maurizio is working to rally the team together, and we are working to have a meeting that will give us an idea of where we stand on that. I can't answer that personally.
Just one quick question, Benny, before I
Sure.
want to interject. So, I'm completely lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Never mind, go ahead. I lost it, don't come back.
I just want to address what Rob was saying, the way it drops. So the middle part It's the six story. Drops to 5.
What does it
On,
mean you need to turn it? You-
No, I'm trying to explain to
Oh,
them.
no, I can look at it upside
Oh,
down.
okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
I've many years of
Yeah.
office experience of presentation.
So you know it's upside down. Sometimes people do that when someone asks you reading upside down. Someone says, "Well, someone that knows how to read, which was it didn't know how to read, can it also upside down?"
Yeah, yes.
Anyway, so the way we change is that at the ends we are a 4-story. Then it goes up to that's 4-story, right?
That's
Or
actually-
three- that's 3 stories.
It's, the 3-story is full bump out, then, 4th and 5th are
Yeah,
set in.
3-story with the terrace on both sides. Then it goes up to 5 stories, and then in the middle goes up to 6 stories to give more some kind of architectural look to it. So we try to adjust the site in a way that I was explaining to respect the neighbors. So, but when you look at it, between what was presented at the time, the public meeting, to what we have today, it's changed a lot, and we're hoping to even improve it for what we have. So we are working diligently to make it better. At the end of the day, this will be for public use, really. And we need to do something that public will come in, appreciate, the community also to come in, it's gonna be public, and appreciate what they see. This is not a place where you lock it up and don't want to go in. If nothing happens, that's what's gonna happen, because what do you do? So if you have something that it's the most beautiful thing in a community, you wanna show it to the public. Other than close it, lock it up, you don't want to touch it. Will deteriorate, and then what's gonna happen in the future? So we're trying to make something that the community will enjoy it, the community will come and walk the property when time comes, will use the facilities, the spa, the hotel, this and that, and also visitors, tourists to come in. So we need to build something that doesn't just make the community happy. We have to look a little bit a wider range of ideas, because it's going to be public.
But ultimately, maybe
So
we
what
do
do you
have
do?
to make the community happy.
Yes, of course.
That's the,
No.
the.
We're not dealing with the outside, we're dealing
Yes.
with the community. So we're just trying to tell everyone, work with us. Let's communicate, let's talk, let's look at what we're doing. Let's make a change if it needs to. The only issue that we had was always that we need so many rooms, to achieve, to make it financial sense. Otherwise, if you build something and then you start losing money on it, what happens? You gotta close it down, and it's embarrassing for everybody. So we have to make sense, we have to look at so many things. So I need the people help to work with me to make it work. We can lower it, but then we have to go wider. We go wider, then we affect the main house. You get too close. If you go the other side, on the west side, then there is the coach house. We're planning to make that into a chapel. So what do? So you're cutting into something that we want to maintain the existing heritage and the trees and everything else within the property. So what do? If you go like this, you have to start cutting trees or build something down. So you go on extra floor, you solve all that problem. So now we have to try to understand, see how can we work together and make everybody, at times you win some and you lose some. So we just have to work together, that's all.
Fair enough. I think if I was a number of residents out there, what I'd be saying is, they don't have to make this project work for you. They're going to say, Mr. Marotta is a pretty smart guy who's been in the real estate business for a long time, bought a piece of property with an OP on it, which I would, as David said, encourage both of you to read along with the amendment. And if that doesn't work, that's not a Niagara-on-the-Lake planning issue to solve. And that's not a compromise from the community that has to happen. I'm not saying that it can't. I'm just saying that the onus is not on the community to accept something that doesn't work for them. The onus is on you to improve something that the community, after a very long, hard-fought battle, eventually agreed on. That's the starting point. We're not starting with a clean sheet of paper. So I don't want this to end on a negative, but I think the reason you're hearing the emotion and the comments that are coming out of the community right now is because what happened in 2011 was a hard-fought process to get somewhere, and what we see now, with some of the comments that have been made and some of the directions that have been made, has been effectively tossing that out and starting from scratch. And I think that's where you're getting a negative reaction, and that's where the neighbors and other people who live in the community are simply going to push back and continue to push back, ideally respectfully, but still push back.
Well, respectfully trying not to do the same mistake that happened in 2011, to design something that just for approval, but rather come up with something that can be built and can be joined by everybody. So we go back to what was designed in 2011, it was never built. There's a reason why.
Right.
So we're just trying to be real rather than dreamers and work with the community to see if we come up to a solution. I mean,
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, and I think we're all on the same page as far as
Yeah.
coming to a solution. No issue with that.
yeah, I'm open to that.
And just to, again, my understanding is that council has approved some process that would also include the Municipal Heritage Committee as well as SOAR in moving forward with, working in a team type of workshop or environment. If that's the case.
We would appreciate, the community would appreciate if that information could be forwarded and the communication line is through the lawyers. It's not through us. We're not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, next meeting, I think that it should happen between the Heritage Committee and through the town, and meet with our consultants, and hopefully they start to dialogue, so to come up to something that can be achieved, a solution. So then we can actually start to show to the people and say it's starting to make sense. So I urge everybody to have the town to start organizing these meetings, and we're gonna be there. We are going to participate, of course. We asked, matter of fact, we came to council 2 weeks ago to ask for it, because we were trying to do it prior to that and didn't happen.
Right.
So we came to the town and asked for publicly. So we're here to do things transparent, open that people understand that we're here to work with everybody.
And we as a community group, I think, have welcomed the opportunity to state our case and ask some questions, but we are not part of the official process. That's between you and the town, and I think, and the community watching, very interesting. And I think one thing that would go very well to improving the relationship is some of these documents and items that we've talked about need to be disclosed. So the archaeological assessment, the status of the heritage designation on the entire site, the tree map that was referenced on page 2 in the application, the revised subdivision plan, which I think we're meant to get today, according to your lawyer's letter, and the environmental impact assessments on 200 John. So
I have something to answer you on some of your questions.
should we maybe bring this to a formal conclusion, and there's some paperwork that needs to be shared?
Yeah.
We can do that, or,
Yeah,
or
let's do
David?
I think so. I mean, it's been a long day for everybody.
Yes.
On a special day for most.
For many.
That's somebody can call me and wake me up if that's wrong. I think I think we'll wrap up the business now, and there'll be some some exchange of information.
Right.
That's,
Sure.
And anything that is exchanged with us, we'll make sure that through our vehicle, everyone is aware of.
Of course.
I think that most of what you're asking already done. They're publicly exposed to the town. It's within the application. So maybe some of you did not look into it, but a lot of this stuff, it's already on the town.
Well, then maybe the best way to bring this to a close, Benny, is we will write down what we're looking for and provide
sure.
that to you through your lawyer, and then you can come back to us,
Yes.
and then we've got a
Okay.
record of
Yes.
what we think is missing.
So can we please try to have an understanding that we are going to organize through the town our next meeting with Heritage Committee. So if you can please help us with the town to organize that.
Well, the heritage
So
meeting.
that way we can start
Yeah, but
the process.
That's not, I think, again, we're not part of the town's process. The town has established heritage committee meetings, which are set through the rest of the year. So I would suggest that you and your team of consultants and advisors move that along to make sure that whatever you need, either at the next meeting or ideally before then, happens, and you provide them with what you need to show them to move them along.
But I understand that your community organization also has hired an architect, or don't know, for what I understand.
We have hired a heritage architect
Yes.
that's commented broadly on process,
Yes.
but that heritage architect at this stage will take instruction from the group at that time. But I think at this point are waiting to see this advanced somewhat more, and there's no point commenting on something that's going to be changed, which is again my point back to the time clock we have running on this. We do not want to be, and I just want to say this categorically, in the way of any process that needs to happen between you and the town. We are a group of interested and engaged residents who want to stay involved and want to watch, but we do not play a formal part in this process.
But we really, personally, I think the community to get involved, which I think it's a good thing. But if you have an heritage architect, maybe he can participate to when we have the meetings with the town, with the heritage committee. We have no issues with that.
I
So
think
that
would be
way,
great.
we can report to the group and to the community what has been discussed. So I'm
And
just
if you
trying
would-
to make us as open, transparent as I can the process.
If you would let Mr. Ragato know that, because he said
Yes,
in
of
open
course.
council 2 weeks ago that anyone we brought to the table would be tainted, and they would prefer to work with others, so.
Can I clarify that though? I believe it was in connection specifically with the peer review process.
Well, it was, but if the party submitting the peer review is tainted, or
Or if
the
they're
list
the
is tainted, then
recommendations are.
I think we're splitting hairs.
Well, I think we're just saying is that if you have someone else, an independent representative representing your concerns, that's fine, but ultimately that would not be the peer review architect or landscape or heritage consultant. That's all, okay?
Fair enough.
But if you have an architect heritage architect that wants to participate when we have the heritage meeting, it's welcome to attend.
Okay,
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
well, David, thank you.
Thank you.